Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch and listen to this podcast. It's me, Omar Sean Borja, the Burger Popper, and I'm joined by a longtime friend of the podcast. It's been a while since I've had him on, but I mean, it's just great. We caught up like nothing, like there's no gap in between, and we're coming a bit full circle with this topic, which we'll discuss later on. But I'm joined by Brock, who man, I'm so glad that he is doing big things in his career now. Now he's a beat writer for the Los Angeles Rams on Sports Illustrated. So definitely come a long way. We both have from the past few years from our first time recording, but a bit of a full circle moment with this discussion. But Brock, thank you for joining. How's everything going?
It's been going great, man. Thank you so much for having me. It really is shocking to see how far both you and I have come since we first met each other several years ago. And I'm really excited because not only do I enjoy talking with you on our shows and stuff, I just enjoy talking ball with you in general. So every time we get a chance to do this again, I'm all giddy on the inside.
Yeah, wow, that means a lot. Same here with me. I mean, it's with anyone, man. Just like anyone I've had on before, it's just like talking to an old friend, and that's honestly the reason I do this. Forget trying to have an audience, everything. Just talking to people, building the college football and spring football community. It's been fun, probably the most fun part of this. Uh, but with our topic, why it's full circle, the first podcast I recorded with Brock about 2021, late 2021, I believe, was the rumor that Hawaii would move one of their home games or one of their power conference home games to Las Vegas. And so at the time, we're like, this is just ridiculous. What a dumb idea. Who wouldn't want to go to Hawaii all the way back in 2021? Well, fast forward to May of 2025, and the Rams released some news, of course, a partnership with the Hawaii, I think, Sports and Tourism Authority. I forget what the name of the bureau is. But, of course, the Rams are doing a mini camp or I guess some summer practices at War Memorial Stadium in Maui. And part of that agreement, apparently, is a game between Hawaii and UCLA is in the works at SoFi Stadium. So now this agreement with UCLA has gone from a home and home and home to a home, away, away, away. With Hawaii and UCLA, one home game for the Warriors, and of course a home game at SoFi Stadium. So first off, before I ask your thoughts, I do want to say I've dressed for the occasion. I got my Mickey Mouse Freedom Bowl hat that I found on eBay. But yeah, so before we start, I guess after that, Brock, what are your thoughts on just this situation? And again, like I said, like we've come full circle on this discussion. And here we are. It's actually happening. Hawaii looks like they're selling home games, like legitimately selling home games.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And when we spoke back in 2021, I honestly I forget exactly what I said, but we had a different perspective on the Hawaii football program than what we do right now. And unfortunately, an enduring truth has once again brought its head around. And unfortunately, for someone like me who grew up in Hawaii, who saw how things develop, especially with construction projects, I forgot the snail's pace that they go on and how that's prevalent in everything that happens in the islands. Now, with this move, unfortunately, this is a byproduct of not having the new Aloha Stadium. Was it entertainment development or district, whatever it's called, right?
Something like
so.
that.
Unfortunately, when Aloha Stadium was going downhill, which it was going downhill for more than 2 decades, right? I think one time there's a theory that we're just going to let the stadium rust to a certain point, and then the rust should hypothetically stop, right? Like there was a time where we could move Aloha Stadium, and then we just like locked it in and thought good enough, right? I don't know why he's doing we, because I wasn't a part of this decision, but a lot of people in high-powered places did so, and because of that, they just want to use Aloha Stadium as long as possible because it is such an important venue for so much things outside of Hawaii Warriors football that they never really developed a plan to go past that. There was always discussions, proposals, but the problem is like anything, when it's time to put the money, that's when everything stops. And this is what's happening again. And that's exactly why we're seeing what we're seeing today in Hawaii selling home games to mainland venues. And unfortunately, when you start doing that, I have to start asking, does this mean that the Hawaii Warriors football program is going to cease to exist in the next 20 years? Because that's the path that they're going on right now when they start to pull out moves like this.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is a very concerning like move for them to actually sell a home game off the island. And for me, like I need to start a jar. I need to start a jar because I know you feel the same way. for how much times I bring up the whole no one wants to go to Hawaii. It's no longer fun for programs argument anymore because, again, the whole appeal of going to Hawaii, it sells itself, right? You're going to Hawaii, you're going like, you don't need a passport. That's a huge hurdle itself for a lot of people, a lot of fans traveling. You get to enjoy the great environment of the island, right? Now, UCLA fans, what they're telling their fans is, you know what, tough luck if you didn't make it in 2024. We're gonna move this game to SoFi Stadium, and that's a disservice to fans. But it's just another step on the path of teams not going to Hawaii, and it really shows, like you said, Brock, that Aloha Stadium was that cornerstone, and now programs are just, without Aloha Stadium, like, why would I want to go to a 17,000 seat stadium, especially when part of the contract, like it was revealed with the Oregon Hawaii game that got moved to like the mid 2030s. Part of the contract is like they get 3,000 or 4,000 tickets. So 3,000 or 4,000 ticket allotment, like you can't really provide that at Clarence Ching Stadium. I mean, or else Hawaii is going to operate at, they're going to lose a lot of money, just offering that much. So it's just sad. It's a continued trend of just teams not wanting to go to Hawaii. And I'm not gonna be aggressive and say that UCLA strong armed Hawaii to do this or make some sort of partnership. But I think that their leverage increased once Oregon decided to cancel their home game on less than a year's notice. It was like 7 months notice that they canceled that game. So it is pretty sad, pretty aggravating. And I am inclined to believe, like, in this environment that, man, like, Hawaii football I think it's been in more danger than it has been in recent years. And this does not help.
I agree. And the problem that I have personally is that I felt Hawaii for the first time in a long time as a football program, off the field per se, was going in a positive direction under former athletic director Craig Angelos. And then when Craig Angelos was eventually terminated under very suspicious circumstances, and this is not a mark against Angelos. This is a mark against the people that made that decision with a president that was already leaving, right? And then obviously his relationship with certain members of the athletic department, and the fact that within the athletic department, it's very hard to get rid of people because they're like union in or something like that. I forget the exact details, but it's very hard to create change in the athletic department. So there's a lot of, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but it does seem like the effort levels can be at an all-time low because there is no risk of, there is ultimate job security over there. However, with him leaving, I think that made a lot of people go, wait a minute, what is going on with Hawaii? Because Angelos was a respected name, especially on the mainland, that was able to negotiate deals for Hawaii that, quite frankly, Hawaii never should have got. Now that they're seeing kind of like this political backwater, which unfortunately is a prevalent thing in Hawaii throughout the entire state, I think people are just against doing business with the islands. When we look at what Oregon did, there was no consequences for them. And when you talk about what UCLA it might be doing or what they might not be doing, even if UCLA has very minimal leverage, it will forever be more leverage than Hawaii ever could provide. Hawaii has no leverage. What leverage do they have? They don't play in a legitimate stadium. They can barely field a team that is over 500. They haven't had a winning season since, I think, 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And when you look at the new era of modern football, college football, they're losing in the transfer portal. They're losing in the NIL battle, right? They're not going to be a part of the Pac-12, which was a decision that they made. They do make some money because of that, but that money isn't enough to overhaul the roster to the point where we're going to go and say, hey, they could potentially compete for that non-Power 5 automatic qualifying bid for the playoffs, even if it does get expanded to 16 teams. So when you look at potentially scheduling a trip to Hawaii, if you're a program, one, you're not going to do it late in the season because why would you want to travel that far? And when it comes to the early part of the season, the ticket allotment, as you mentioned, doesn't make any sense. When you talk about the facilities that they're going to have access to in terms of the locker room, practice facilities, things of that nature, that's not at the level that they're accustomed to. They have to travel across an ocean when a lot of those teams like Oregon and UCLA, they already have to travel across the country as members of the Big Ten. So realistically, again, what benefit is there? And if Hawaii themselves are not going to be able to market themselves positively, they have to go out there and perform or play games at SoFi or play games at Allegiant, because what else do they got going for them?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the performance on the field is also a big I think it's a bigger thing than at least I've paid attention to in this whole situation because in the playoff, like everyone wants to either build a resume or at least that's what it seems ideally, right? But playing Hawaii at Hawaii, like when that's a game you can lose. But I mean, if Hawaii were better though, if Hawaii were better, I really feel like more teams would be wanting to boost their resumes. Maybe not in the power four ranks, but in the group of five, a non-conference game against Hawaii to help boost your college football playoff resume for the one group of five spot in the playoff, that would be something that's attractive. But I can't remember the last time a marquee group of five team played in Hawaii in the regular season. And I mean, I know the target audience here is power four schools. How do we keep power four schools from playing in Hawaii? But at this point too, if Hawaii doesn't add as much benefit to your schedule to your resume as it did in the June Jones days, it's like, Hawaii is nice. It's an amazing island. It's a vacation it's an amazing place. But from a football perspective, on the field perspective, it's like, why do this to our players? Why do this when it doesn't really add much value? I mean, to our resume too. So I think that on the field, that's a great point that you brought up. But you mentioned Craig Angelos, and I think that's a good segue to ask. Like, do you think something like this ever happens with Angelos as AD?
I don't. Not to this extent per se. I do think that they would try to make a game at SoFi. I think that if they have a 13 game schedule, because they sometimes depends if they go 13 to 12, I think that they could use a 13th game as a neutral site game. I do think that they would have held off with UCLA and maybe try and find a more marquee opponent because UCLA doesn't even sell at the Rose Bowl, you know? And yes, the argument is that they're going to play earlier in the season. And that's when the Rose Bowl is super hot because of the outdoor stadium. So maybe they'll have more fans come in for the indoors. But when we look at, just the size of SoFi Stadium, you're going to have a fairly empty venue with UCLA. They don't have the fan base that other programs do. It's just an unfortunate fact. And then you also have to add the fact that how many people who care about Hawaii football are going to show up to SoFi Stadium. Sure, you may have a fair bit because we have seen those numbers at Allegiant Stadium. Las Vegas also has a massive population with Hawaii ties compared to Los Angeles. Now you're asking those people in Las Vegas or the surrounding areas to drive for something hours to try and find accommodations for hotel, to try and find tickets for the game, to pay for parking, things of that nature. In this modern economy, I just don't see how that's going to work out. Even if all the Hawaii tied people in Los Angeles who care about Hawaii football show up to the event. Alongside that, it's a diminished football product, unfortunately. While I do have hope that Micah Alejandro, I believe that's his last name, I apologize if I mispronounced it, is going to lead Hawaii into that new era of run and shoot. I've been talking to some people, and quite frankly, they're sick and tired with the results that we have seen. They're sick and tired of watching Hawaii go out to Sam Houston State and lose. They're tired of watching Hawaii struggle against one of the worst teams in FCS football in their season opener, whatever it was. They're tired of just watching a product that they're just not excited about anymore. And even if it's not June Jones, Rolovich had a product people could be excited about. For a little bit of time, Todd Graham produced a product that was people could get excited about. Greg Mackin did. The Timmy Chang era is very reminiscent of the Norm Chow era, but the good thing about Chow was that he brought in players that would make you excited for the first 3 weeks of the season. Where is the excitement? So not only do you have the financial burden, you also have a potential travel burden, and you also have the lack of a strong football product. How do you expect to make this deal happen? Sure, UCLA is going to say, yeah, we just got to drive 15 minutes down the road from our school, and this counts as a road game for us. Yeah, we're going to do it. And yeah, we're going to overwhelm them with fans. For if Andros was in charge, I think that the deals that he was making were more meant for long-term solutions. And playing a home game on a neutral site in 2027 seems like one swing for the fences. If it doesn't hit, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I think that last point you made is a very good point where it's like Angelos was a visionary. I mean, for years beyond. I remember him saying in one of the interviews that he wanted Hawaii to play a game in Japan, which I mean, I would love the day for them to play a game in Japan because I do think that the market is there for that. I mean, that's just the type of forward-thinking visionary he was. And with the scheduling of the games and looking at what's on Hawaii's schedule, I mean, years down the road, of course, the first game that the new Aloha Stadium, supposed to be the Kansas game in 2028, and then years beyond that, they have Arizona. I mean, I think that one was a 2-by-2 home and home series, and that the first game in that one was 20. I think it was like 2019 or 2016, even 2016 or something like that. So that's like culmination of a 16-year series with, I mean, just forward thinking with Angelos there as AD. But also too, I think that's interesting too about the excitement of the product having to play a role with that, because for your team, I think when I think about neutral site games, of course my mind gravitates to the Shamrock series, right? And it's like, whenever Notre Dame, sets up shop for the Shamrock series, there's local excitement there because it's Notre Dame. And now I'm not trying to compare Hawaii to Notre Dame, but like you said, if the interest isn't there on the island, as you're saying with this team, where yes, the run and shoots back, but this team is still popping out 5-7, 4-8 seasons. Like if the excitement isn't there on the island, I mean, what's to say that's going to be there in Los Angeles and Hollywood? Like, I mean, with not just local fans, but with casual fans that may be priced out of a USC game. I mean, I'm not sure who USC will be playing that weekend, but I can imagine the ticket prices would be probably higher than this. What's going to cause excitement with the local community, if there's just no star power, right? I imagine something like this working, and I know saying the Cole Brennan days, June Jones days is a cop out, but I imagine something like this working in that time when there's a star power. Like, imagine 2007, let's say SoFi Stadium exists in 2007 and Hawaii moves the game to the mainland, and they get to promote Colt Brennan, all the stars in that team, Devon Best, Ryan Grice-Mullen. Like, there's legitimate star power to market this to the local community, about, these guys going from the island to Hollywood where stars are made. And yes, Micah Alejado had an amazing end of the season, of course, with them upsetting UNM, but, he's not a household name even in the Mountain West per se. So that's just another tough aspect with this. And like you said, the travel demands in this economy, and at the end of the day, like, they already play at an NFL stadium almost like biannually with Allegiant Stadium. So I kind of wonder too, which I guess is a good segue to the next question, is like, will fans even savor this experience if they visit Allegiant every other year? I know SoFi Stadium is a different stadium, but would Hawaii fans particularly enjoy that, or is there some sort of fatigue just with going to, or kind of, I guess, like an apathy with going to NFL stadiums now?
I think they would enjoy it because SoFi Stadium is truly a gem. Beyond anything else, I have been fortunate enough to go to SoFi Stadium. I've covered games at Allegiant Stadium, so I feel like I'm fairly qualified to talk about both stadiums. And while Allegiant is fantastic, it's new, it's modern, SoFi Stadium is a gem all to itself. There is something so cool, so stunning, so futuristic about it. I think the Hawaii fans will enjoy it the first time, and I don't think they have fatigue about it at all. However, that enjoyment might go away with about 6 minutes remaining in the first quarter. Because at the end of the day, you're going there to enjoy the football product. And you can only savor so much around you when you're having a good time in general. And if Hawaii just doesn't bring it, I just don't think they're going to savor it. The other part to it is something I want to mention earlier. I'm not really sure if it ties into your question. I just think it is really important to say. Even if you don't count the Colt Brand days, which are the glory days, right? If you look back before then, in the early 2000s, during when Nick Rolovich was a player and Timmy Chang was a player, with Ashley Lally as a wide receiver, and even beyond that with Bryant Moniz, and then again during the Nick Rolovich era as coach, Hawaii was visible. You could catch them on ESPN fairly often, or CBS Sports, or some of these bigger networks. And now it feels like the only time you're able to watch Hawaii football on one of the bigger networks is when they go on the road to a Michigan or an Oregon, a place they're going to lose, right, against a top premier team. And the only reason is because you're there to watch Oregon. You're not there to watch Hawaii. Hawaii was playing conference games on national television at one point. They're playing Michigan State at 04 on ESPN, And when you don't have those things anymore, they hurt. For Hawaii viewers, I believe I haven't been home in a while, so I'm just I believe so. They're still I think it's the last year of the pay-per-view deal. So that has hurt home visibility. On the mainland, I got to watch it on my phone on this app called like Team One Sports that sometimes kind of bugs out. Like after a while, try to refresh, you kind of don't care, especially when you're tied with Alcorn State. And not even Alcorn State, they're a much better program. Whoever Hawaii opened up last year, like my phone was bugging out. I swear Hawaii was like leading by like 1.5 time. I don't remember. It was so bad. And you just kind of give up at that point. So going back to the SoFi experience, is the experience of checking out SoFi Stadium worth as much as it's going to take to get in the stadium when you know the product that you're going to be looking at is not good, considering the very few times you're able to see it on TV, it was either done on a terrible broadcast, which speaks volumes about the product, or on national television when they're getting beat up by an Oregon or a Michigan. You know, I think these things, they count towards a game at SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, I think that's an outstanding point. Like, I didn't even think about that, right? Because, in this day and age, when you think of exposure is just kind of like it's just kind of a generic term that, doesn't really mean much at the surface because, it's 2025. We can watch any game we want. But the fact of the matter is, like, when it's as difficult to watch a Hawaii game, even though it's free, when the presentation is not there, you have to watch it on your phone, like you said. And even then, like, most families, of course, have like smart TVs. There's not a smart TV app for Team One Sports, and if I wanted to do Team One Sports, I'd have to buy an HDMI and an adapter for my phone to put it on the screen. And at that point, it's like, what fan's gonna add that, just to watch Hawaii football on a bigger screen? And so those hurdles get in the way, and like you said, like the visibility is not there. And like you brought me back to 2019 when Hawaii won the Western Division, in the Mountain West, and the division clinching game against San Diego State was on Spectrum Sports Hawaii. When that was a national TV, that was a national TV worthy game on Spectrum Sports Hawaii. And again, like the only times, like you say, like they're on TV, which I'm not going to say it's a failure of the Mountain West TV deal. It's on CBS Sports Network, which, it has like low viewership. It's never been Nielsen rated, but I think the Mountain West TV deal has not done schools like Hawaii a service because, the TV deal is really catered to your Boise State, your San Diego State, and most of all Air Force. I mean, where instead of having games on ESPN, like, you got CBS as your main TV partner. And what does that mean? You got a few games on CBS per year, which is great for the conference, but who's going to be on those teams? Who's going to be on those games? Not Hawaii. And first of all, and most of all, it's going to be the Air Force Academy that's going to be the beneficiary of most of those games. And so as a result of partnering with, CBS, you have CBS Sports Network where a good amount of your games are. And like you said, with the star power of the country not seeing these games, like Ashton Genty played at Hawaii. I mean, this past year. I mean, but that game was on CBS Sports Network at 11 p.m. And while, yeah, Ashton Genty had the hype behind him, I don't think many of the country really cared. And even then, Hawaii was, of course, the B side of that game. So, just great points about, I guess, the media exposure, the current media state of the Mountain West and Hawaii with the pay-per-view deal just hurting their exposure for a thing like this to be marketable. So,
yeah, and something I want to add too is that we saw UNLV, regardless of on the road or at home, get more nationally televised games or more viewership in these past couple of years because not only was their football product good, they were also playing inside Allegiant Stadium. If Hawaii was playing inside a new Aloha Stadium, it was different. They were also on TV a bunch back in the day because they were at Aloha Stadium, a stadium people recognize because of the great history, because of all the Pro Bowls, because of this and that. Do people really want to tune in to a Hawaii game where they can barely set up all the appropriate camera angles? I mean, trying to watch the Hawaii Bowl compared to some of the other bowls was difficult. I mean, we got blessed by the fact that we had an absolute phenomenal game in the last Hawaii Bowl. I believe South Florida versus, I forget, but I believe the game went to like overtime and like it was like a long overtime, but it was fun to watch. But at the same time, I'm sure people are thinking like some of these angles are kind of odd, but that's what you get when you play in a high school level stadium. I don't even think they host the Hawaii State Championships at TC Ching. I think they host at Kamehameha, the high school, and that kind of plays a factor into these things too. Something that I want to add to this conversation about Hawaii, SoFi Stadium, and their stadium thing in general is that what is after this? Let's say they secure this 2027 deal with UCLA. Okay, what do you do next? You still got to go back to UCLA in 2028 because that's a home game for UCLA at the Rose Bowl. They're not going to move that, And if other teams are watching you vacate your home games to go play in their state, they might demand you to do that too, but maybe not at a neutral site. Maybe you got to go play at their home stadium and they'll cut you a check or something like that. I really just don't see how this isn't a slippery slope to more teams trying to take advantage of Hawaii. And again, Hawaii just doesn't have the leverage to simply say no. When you talk about Angelos, he navigated the whole Mountain West going to the Pac-12 thing pretty like solid. There's a lot of times he thought Hawaii was going to go with everybody to the Pac-12. They ended up becoming a full member of the Mountain West, which I believe gave them a little bit more money to work with because they do have very tight margins at the athletic department. And by margins, I mean just in the red every year. It feels like, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I'm not even sure who's really calling the shots at UH anymore. And now I'm hearing rumors that they might rehire Angelos. Like, again, when you just have directionless leadership, you have one-off things like this that just prove to be just like what was the point? And that's how I kind of feel about this whole SoFi thing. I know I've been rambling, but what is the point? And I'm trying to find that. I just haven't discovered it yet.
Yeah, we've both been rambling too, so no worries about that. But I mean, like you said, like it does create a slippery slope. I mean, with Kansas coming up, because my thing is like if this happens to Hawaii, or I guess not even if it happens to Hawaii, this happened to Memphis, where Memphis had a home and home with Missouri, but Missouri told them, all right, cancel the game or move it to St. Louis at the Edward Jones Dome, which is an outdated venue. Of course, I mean, I like watching the Battlehawks in the UFL, right? They have a great fan base, but, the Edward Jones Dome or whatever it's called, the Dome at America's Center, it's not a state-of-the-art venue that fans go to or get excited to go to. So, I mean, it happened to Memphis, one of the class teams of the group of five, one of the biggest brands in the group of five. I mean, it's going to happen to Hawaii, and they kind of just did it to themselves, in making this deal with the Rams and with, the Hawaii Board of Tourism. So, I mean, it's like you said, it's a good point because it does create a slippery slope. And they play Kansas, which, Arrowhead Stadium's nearby. They play Arizona, which has whatever it's called, State Farm Stadium nearby. So it's like these are just teams that see this happening and be like, instead of canceling a game and having to pay a buyout, why don't we have a third party force Hawaii to move these games to the stadium at no cost, and we even pocket we pocket money just by the event planning and by saving on travel costs. So like you said, it's definitely a slippery slope. And I will say with the Kansas and Arizona games, like I think those games are candidates to move to Vegas, which I want to know your thoughts on that. But I can also see those games moving to like either Arrowhead for Kansas or State Farm Stadium for Arizona.
So Kansas, I genuinely believe that game is going to get canceled. I see no reason Kansas is going to play Hawaii, not anywhere except if Hawaii decides to go to Lawrence. I believe the stadium will be opened up by that time. You bring up a great point. And something I want to add is this before I get into your question. When you look at what Hawaii's non-conference future looks like, it's not looking good for them. And here's what. The typical teams that we have watched Hawaii play in non-conference play over the past 10 or so years. So I'll just start naming them off. Oregon, Washington State, Oregon State, UCLA, Cal, one time in Australia, USC, Arizona State, right? All the old Pac-12 West Coast schools for the most part, right? Well, now look where all those schools are. USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon are on the Big Ten, so they're not going to want to travel far because they got to travel far anyway, and they hold all the power over Hawaii. So either Hawaii's going to have to go on the road, or they're not going to play them. So that eliminates 4 major Power 4 teams. Then you look at Cal and Stanford. Well, they play in the ACC, so they definitely don't want to travel to the Pacific, so you can just rule them out. Okay, well, if that's the case. Oregon State, Washington State, well, they're not really Power 5 teams because the Pac-12 isn't a Power 5 conference anymore. I don't care what anybody says. They're not going to get a bid for the Power. Do you really think the acquisition of Utah State and like Colorado State is enough to get them back? Like, come on, let's be real now. So they're not even a Power 5 conference anymore. And so you got the Big 12 teams left from the West Coast, which is BYU, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State. Well, as we mentioned, Arizona is about 1 hour away from State Farm Stadium. Arizona State's like, I think 15, 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So they're not going to want to travel to the Pacific because they got to travel to places like Cincinnati and West Virginia and Central Florida. So Arizona State got the leverage, and then we talk about Colorado. You think Deion Sanders wants to come to Hawaii? Sure, maybe one time as like a recruiting trip to like spread the Colorado brand, but they're staying in Boulder. The only place they'll go is to Mile High, Stadium where they used to play the Rocky Mountain Showdown. And then Utah and BYU. BYU has already made it clear they don't care about Hawaii anymore. They haven't cared about Hawaii in a long, long time. So write them out. So it's Utah. Utah's it. In terms of the Power 5 on the West Coast that Hawaii could legitimately have any type of, I don't want to leverage because I have leverage, any type of negotiating wiggle room is Utah. Or you can stack your non-conference schedules with multiple FCS games or only one of them counts towards bowl eligibility. Or you can go and try to get your old Pac-12, who used to be in the Mountain West and whack with, to try and make deals with them. But then you talk about strength of schedule. Let's say Hawaii does get stuff together in the football field. Let's say they run the table. They go undefeated. Well, people are going to look at their strength of schedule and may put in a hypothetical, right? 11-1 Boise State team whose only loss was to Oregon over a 12-0 Hawaii, whose non-conference schedule consisted of teams generally in the group of 5. So no matter what, they put themselves in a situation they can't get out of. No matter what happens, they're screwed. There is no more college football playoff bowl games anymore where they can go and try and get a big payday, right? There's no more of those things. They don't have the conference affiliation. If they go out to an Ohio State or Wisconsin to get that $1 million paycheck or whatever, that's going to tank their season right then and there. So if they can't get into the playoffs, there's like literally no possible way for them to get into the playoffs. If they can't maintain home superiority on the schedule, if they can't schedule strong opponents, if they have to keep settling for bad TV contracts and also lack of a home crowd, where does it end? And the answer is when they build new Aloha Stadium. They're not building new Aloha Stadium right now because, once again, as I mentioned, whenever it's time for anything in Hawaii for the money to get produced for it, the project stops. So unfortunately, I'm not trying to sound like a cynic, but when you look at the football program, it is a representation of the state in general, and the state is hurting, and it's been hurting for a long time. And I'm not trying to go all the way back to make this a whole political conversation, but I grew up in Hawaii. I lived there the first 18 years of my life. I'm fairly well traveled, but I still had that island mindset all the way out there where I thought certain things was just the norm. Then you go to the mainland and you realize rail projects should not take 25 years to finish, or however long it's been. That's when you realize furlough Fridays, when we're sending all the public school kids home on Fridays because we can't afford to teach all of them. That's not normal. Like, it is in Hawaii. It's not in anywhere else. And that's what we're seeing with the football program right now. Not normal things happening that affect them on a national scale. But unfortunately, they don't have the visionary of a national scale to try and lead them through this very daunting maze that they're in.
Wow, yeah, that's an amazing point. With the furlough Fridays, I didn't know that was a thing, honestly. But that the domino effects are very clear, like you said. Just looking at their FB schedules, I'm just honestly flabbergasted by just the lack of depth in terms of just great non-conference opponents. They're only fully scheduled out to 2027. 2028, they have 2 games and 1 FCS, and they're probably not going to get a 13th game anytime soon, honestly, in any of these schedules. But you look at 2026, you got Stanford, New Mexico State, Arizona State, and UMass as part of the schedule. They play at Arizona State. Arizona State's not offering return trip, and then UMass is trying to get out of that game. They've made it public that they're trying to renegotiate that game and move it to a different year. In fact, it didn't even show up on their athletic director's his address to season ticket holders all the way back in late 2024. So that tells you as much with that game. And then you go to 2027. You got UMass, New Mexico State, FCS game against Northwestern State and UCLA. And that's your last full schedule that's on FB schedule. So these schedules are just, it's kind of getting to the point where it's like you play whoever you need to play. And I wish I saw this red flag back in 2021 when they did the in-season home and home with New Mexico State, Which I mean, you do what you have to do, right? It's better than scheduling two FCS games, but the fact that Hawaii would even have to do something like that at the time, it should have been a red flag, really. And like you said, with these schedules, like I mean, Hawaii's best chance is going probably like 11-1 with one loss to a Power Five team or Power Four team to make it to the playoff. Um, most years is probably going to be a 10-2, the best case scenario, like in 2026, 10-2 against with losses to Stanford and Arizona State, but your two non-conference wins are against a middling New Mexico State, maybe in Conference USA, and a UMass team in the MAC for their second year, probably still finding their way. And it's like you look at that resume along with who's left in the Mountain West, like they better hope that UNLV and Air Force are national front runners in that conference or making a name for themselves nationally, because with that schedule, that non-conference schedule, you're not turning any heads. So, I mean, I think that's an amazing point you made about how this is scheduled, how this is, seeping into their viability as a playoff team. And it's sad with where it's as great a time for any group of five team to make the playoff in general. I mean, as for how many spots, that's a discussion for a different time, but this is the best time it's been to be a group of five team in a long time, and Hawaii is not going to be able to cash into that, like you said, with these schedules.
Yeah, and quite frankly, and this kind of goes back to your question about using Allegiant Stadium. So there has been discussions with possible usage of Allegiant Stadium with the state and I believe the Raiders or the Allegiant Stadium, whatever it is. Those basically the way the report was written, it's Hawaii making a call and the other side isn't picking up, and that kind of points out exactly what we've been seeing, and that is nobody cares about Hawaii, and Hawaii hasn't done anything themselves to make people care about them. I don't see Hawaii being able to capitalize on the Vegas market anymore because there's so many things that Allegiant Stadium is getting used for during the season. Obviously, Raiders on Sundays when they're playing home games, UNLV on Saturdays when they're playing home games, concerts, events, as we all know, that come with the Vegas atmosphere. But something that we could be seeing after 2028, when we start talking about when Hawaii's non-conference schedule becomes wide open, is that the Big Ten's agreement with Lucas Oil Stadium expires for their conference championship game. The commissioner of the Big Ten has already announced that they want to start going westward to benefit their West Coast programs. I got laughed at for writing this, and I understand why, but I still believe this fully. I think that the Big Ten in the next decade is going to make a massive push towards the West Coast, acquiring properties you might not expect. I truly think my alma mater, UNLV, is one of them, but only one. I think that they could also go after Cal and Stanford if anything happens to the ACC. And depending on how they want to schedule it, they could go after Oregon State and Washington State as well if they want to kind of rebuild a pseudo Pac-12 conference in order to limit cross-country travel to perhaps only one game a season for all their teams, right? Because, for example, for UCLA, because I write for UCLA on SI as well, in 2024, they had to play at Nebraska and they had to play at Rutgers during the season. That's one thing. Like Oregon had to play at Michigan and at Purdue, if I'm not like, for example. If they can limit those to one game a season, that also means Michigan's only traveling to the West Coast once. Ohio State, the only loss last year outside of the Michigan game was to Oregon in Eugene. I think they want to limit that. Michigan's lost at Washington. Penn State almost got upset by USC until USC shit the bucket at the Coliseum. So I think the Big Ten really is pushing to the West. And in that, they could be looking at Allegiant Stadium too to host either big-time non-conference games, like how we saw USC LSU this season, even though that was an agreement before the move, if I'm not mistaken, and also to host potentially the championship game there as well. Well, if Allegiant Stadium is taking on all those big money events and this little Hawaii thing comes up, you think they're going to care about that? Do you think they're really going to put in the effort, especially when you have to negotiate with so many parties to make it happen? It's really, from a financial standpoint, not in their interest when there are so many other people with bigger pockets that want to use Allegiant Stadium, which puts Hawaii at another disadvantage. And then when you start looking at this UCLA thing, sure. I mean, look at the history of the LA Bowl. The highest attendance was when UCLA was playing in it. So you will have fair attendance. But that's going to be mainly Bruins fans. Well, if Bruins fans are showing up, I don't know what the current negotiation is going to look like, but if they want to play this game again, UCLA is going to look for a bigger portion of the profits. That means not only is Hawaii going to have to sacrifice another home game to play UCLA going forward, and these negotiations may be happening now with this game as well, they will also have to give up a bigger piece of the pie. How does that make sense? In all of these scenarios that I've mentioned in the 40 minutes that we've been talking, has any of them truly benefited Hawaii in any positive way? That's what happens when you have directionless leadership.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, right? Just like the lack of direction in general, kind of. I mean, you just look back all the way back to like the 2010s, right, with the whack of the Mountain West. Like, yeah, Hawaii got out and went to the Mountain West, but I'm pretty sure they're one of the last teams to leave the Mountain West. I'm pretty sure. I mean, they were on that life raft with like the Nevadas, your Fresno States, and whatnot, right? But they weren't one of the first teams leading that charge to go to the Mountain West. I think, like you said, the directionless leadership stretches back to then with conference stuff, and I feel like too, if the Pac-12, as it has been reported, was actually approaching Hawaii for membership in the Pac-12, in my eyes, it's like, no offense to, I'm not going to take a side with the Pac-12 and Mountain West conflict that's happening right now, but it's like, if you're Hawaii, why wouldn't you associate yourself with, not just Washington State and Oregon State and Boise State from a football perspective, but you get a chance to play Gonzaga every year on the hard court. But of course, directionless leadership tells you to take the money now, but there's no plan to do anything with the money when it comes to the grant of rights that their members signed. I'm sure UNLV and Air Force, the beneficiaries who got, I think, 24.5% of the cut from the rest of the conference, were able to, or they have plans for what they're doing with that exit fee, the treasure chest that the Mountain West is having. But does Hawaii realistically have a plan with that money? It was it's like a short-sighted fix, like this LA game at SoFi Stadium is. So, I think like you said, the directionless leadership is really showing at this point, and it's a slippery slope and it's Pandora's box. Something that I didn't think of before. Where, like you said, like, yeah, what if that stadium is probably going to be 80% Bruins fans, 20% Hawaii fans, maybe a little bit more. But what's to say UCLA doesn't gain leverage from this, like you said, which leverage has been honestly the key word of our discussion, where Hawaii is just giving up all of its leverage, where tourism in this day and age to the island, it's not what it used to be, sadly. It's a shame, honestly. But at this point, like you said, it's funny with Allegiant discussion, where it seems like Allegiant Stadium isn't answering the call. But I think it's interesting too that SoFi reached out, because I overlooked the fact that Allegiant does have so much going on. With UNLV staying there, when realistically, like for SoFi Stadium, they only have about like 8 or 9 events a year, like huge events. I don't know I think they're hosting World Cup games in 2026, but it's going to go back to the norm of 8 to 10 events each year at SoFi before, in 2027 when they play this game.
So something I want to mention is this as well. That might play a factor into negotiations. I don't have all the information right in front of me, so next time we talk, I'll make sure to get all of that in. But SoFi Stadium was privately funded, mainly by the Cronkies, in order to build, whereas Allegiant Stadium required state funds. So that, from a who can make calls standpoint, is massively different on both sides. Secondly, the Rams will be willing to help facilitate the SoFi Stadium move because they have a vested interest in the Pacific, something the Raiders do not have as much. In terms of international markets, the Raiders are much more focused on their influence in the Latin American communities, especially Mexico, because one, lot of Mexican American fans are Raiders fans, and also 49ers fans, so you have to compete with the West Coast area, which is so many teams. But at the same time, when you talk about Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, all the way down Central America into South America, that's kind of more their domain. The Rams are looking for their domain, and they're going to the Pacific. They're going to play a game in Australia in 2026. The Rams and the Hawaii Tourism Authority work together to put in the Maui camp or mini camp in Hawaii to help out and, really help the tourism industry in Hawaii and in this new partnership. But when you look at the new international market rights, the Rams, I believe, are the only team to have rights in Japan, in South Korea. I think they also have rights in China. They definitely have rights in Australia with a couple other teams. But we start looking at some of those other markets, New Zealand, potentially certain parts of Russia. If politically that gets cleaned up, that's more down the line. We got to, but just, it's a forward-thinking world that we live in, right? The countries that make up former Indochina, right? Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, all the way down to Indonesia, and then Papua New Guinea, right? So some of those are very small markets. But when you're talking about global expansion, the Pacific, from a football standpoint, is such untouched territory. And for the Rams, they have the most marketable Polynesian superstar in the NFL right now, in Puka Nacua, a player who has been very vocal recently about a variety of topics. So his name is getting out there. His name is visible much more beyond his play, right? Where you can recognize Puka Nacua without his helmet on. So that's why it makes sense for the Rams to help facilitate the SoFi move, if just to kind of keep things good with Hawaii, because when they venture out into the Pacific, the last main U.S. territory they have outside of military bases and like Guam in the Pacific is Hawaii. So they want to make sure they kind of not own Hawaii, but like basically their territory is Hawaii from an NFL standpoint. Going back to Hawaii, this is unfortunately a problem that has existed my entire life, and that is no vision from the athletic director or the athletic department. It goes all the way back to, I believe it was Herman Moore was his name. I forget what his name was. He was the gentleman who was the athletic director that saw the departure of both football coach June Jones and also basketball coach Rusty Wallace. I believe it was Rusty Wallace. I apologize if I messed up the names. It's been a long time, and I got so much stuff to remember. But we saw what happened there. I remember when Ben Jay was in charge, or what was it? It was Jim Donovan who was in charge when they got scammed out of like $200,000 on a fake Stevie Wonder concert. When has that ever happened in the rest of the United States, right? And then with Ben Jay, I remember one time there's a comment saying that they couldn't afford the football program anymore. My late great judo sensei Robin Mori took his kids and some volunteers who were on the street with buckets. They're trying to fundraise for UH. Like, that's how bad it got. Also rest in peace, Sensei Mori. And then you kind of keep going down the line with AD after AD. Say what you want about Matlin. There are two decisions that happened that were very detrimental to UH. Hiring Todd Graham, which I didn't know how bad it was going to get. I'll be honest, like, I didn't even realize how bad it was until after he left. That's why you kind of see some of my earlier ratings where I'm like, hey, the situation not making sense. I kind of defended him a little bit. My tune changed as soon as I found out kind of some of the deeper stuff that happened. But then the response to it has been far more detrimental than what happened. Not only hiring Timmy Chang, which is this not a shot at Timmy Chang, but this is a shot at his lack of experience. And you saw that, right? Well, now we're entering year 4 of Timmy Chang. What has changed, really? I think that a major point when you start to see like where Hawaii is going, or the fact they're not going anywhere, is when former quarterback Braden Schrager hit the portal and then was allowed to come back and be the starter. And then with the Sagapo Tele kid, he didn't really get a lot of playing time. What is his last? Alejado. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad.
Alejado.
I just want to say this very quick. I'm terrible with last names. Like, you should have seen me at Matthew West Media Day before I was doing my interviews. I had to ask every player, how do you pronounce your last name? I apologize. But you finally, then you saw what was there in the last game. Got a little bit excited. But then you start to ask yourself, well, if that was against New Mexico, who was on the verge of bowl eligibility, well, why wasn't he playing this entire time? And then you've seen the coaching turnover that happens with the program. As always, what you see is turnover. From a UNLV perspective, that kind of reminds me of when Marcus Arroyo was in charge, right? You saw coaching turnover. You saw no progress on the field. You saw issues within the athletic department, and then he was fired. They brought in Barry Odom, a guy like June Jones, who's been there, who's done that, who can kind of manage these things, and then you saw the turnaround. So that when Matlin decided to, I don't want to use the word strong arm because that might be a bit too much of a term, but whatever that deal was, that June Jones is going to be a coach for a couple of years and Chang is going to take over this and that. Jones was right. That's not how you build a program. You cannot have a coach that's a lame duck coach. No one's going to commit to a program with a lame duck coach, right? But if you allowed him to set it up for Chang to learn under him, if that was a situation they're going to go with, okay, we can make this work because Chang's name gets boosted at being part of June Jones's coaching staff, right? More than a GA in what he was at SMU. This is kind of the situation that we're seeing with the Rams right now. And I always talk about the Rams because I cover them heavily. The reason why so many head coaches from the Rams get hired is because their name is associated with Sean McVay. That's why Chris Shula is going to be a head coach next year. Mike LaFleur might be a head coach, and that's why guys like Matt LaFleur became head coaches. Brandon Staley, Kevin O'Connell, Raheem Morris again, right? Because their name was attached. You saw what they did with McVay. All right, well, we want a little piece of that. Well, if you had Jones in, and if Jones was successful, that's a crucial part. If Jones is successful, you can see, oh, hey, this is what Timmy Chan did with June Jones. Okay, now June Jones is gone. Well, hey, he was right there. He was making it happen with him. All right, we'll give you a little more trust. Give you a little leverage in contract negotiations, a little leverage in player recruitment. You know, these little things play such a huge factor. Hawaii, unfortunately, does not look at the little things, and that's why the big things fail to even start. And it is what it is. It's been the same way since I was 1 year old in 2000, when I was 8 years old in 2007, and when I'm 26 years old in 2025. It's just kind of how it goes. And until Hawaii is able to get out of this repeating cycle of bleh, I guess kind of the word's not coming, just bleh, we're going to have short-sighted moves like potentially moving a home game to Los Angeles.
Yeah, I don't think there's much I can add, honestly, beyond that. I think that's a great way to sort of start to wrap up the show, where all of this is just years and years and years of just sweeping dirt under the rug until it becomes a mound that trips you up repeatedly and you still don't do anything about it. But you don't have a vacuum to clean it up. You don't have a dustpan to clean it up. Just kept sweeping it under the rug. But I will say, that's interesting about the international markets, because for me, I'm very like the whole concept of the international market confuses me from an NFL perspective, because I've gotten to the point where I'm a casual NFL fan. I just watch Monday Night Football and, you know, the Christmas games. Well, I used to watch Christmas games until they're on Netflix, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, I think that's just it's interesting to me about how teams are really diving into the international markets. When I first saw the list, I'm like, what the heck is this? It's just a list of names. It's a list of countries and teams next to it, and this means nothing to me. I'm like, these teams aren't moving anywhere. Like exclusive rights, like I'm pretty sure anyone in Germany can root for any team they want. But as the NFL is now moving so many games internationally, and like you said, like the international presence, we're getting like the international partners program with like, or whatever it's called, with these international players going to teams. Like you said, like with the Rams having a vested interest, that's a really great point where it's like they're actually getting something out of this, and like the Raiders not getting anything out of it. It's an interesting point that I definitely overlooked just being a casual NFL fan now. I also think too, I think the Rams ultimately do want to get back to Hawaii, which is just another disservice of the whole Aloha Stadium situation, because the Rams played a preseason game at Aloha Stadium. I forget what year it was, but this is like mid-2010, 2019. Thank you. Like, I mean, the best they can do now is a few practices at War Memorial Stadium. But I mean, the Rams are saying like, you know, we want to associate ourselves with the Highlands. But man, like, who knew? It's just sad that the effects of the neglect to Aloha Stadium, or maybe not so much neglect, but the lack of a plan for Aloha Stadium is just hurting the island just almost exponentially at this point. You know, it's almost sad at this point. This is very depressing. Probably one of the more depressing podcasts I've done since I restarted this in 2020, where it's just like, it's just a bleak situation, sadly. And like, granted, I'm excited to see Hawaii play in an NFL stadium on the mainland. It rarely happens. I mean, but man, it's just sad that it has to come to this. Like, I mean, I'm not happy that they're doing this, but it's something out of fascination that I'm interested in. But I think that's my last real remarks on this topic, Brock, unless you have anything else to add, because I think you summed it up perfectly almost.
Yeah, you know, this definitely was a vent session for me. I've been trying to ignore Hawaii football as much as possible, but it will forever hold my heart, because that's just that's what got me into football. You know, I was watching UH and at least college football in general, and that's what really helped grow my love for it. There's two things I want to add to this. One is my perspective on things. Do you know how sickening it is for me? You know, when I played in high school, it was a very short time. You know, we played a lot of our games at Aloha Stadium. Can't do that no more in high school. Hawaii football would play there. There'd be the swap meet outside. There'd be the state fair. There would be the great Aloha run that would go through the stadium. There'd be all of this stuff. The state knew Aloha Stadium was going downhill. We have known that for a long time, decades, right? How sickening it is to see when I went home. I went home in 2023 in December. And when I went home in 2023, it was the first time I went back to the island since I left in January of 2020. And the reason I didn't go back was because of COVID and all the policies because of that. And then, there wasn't really a reason for me to go back at that time. So I finally got to go home 2023. The stadium, Aloha Stadium, hasn't been in use like for the stands and stuff since 2020, if I'm not mistaken. It's still up there, right? So it's this old, decaying, rotting away mess that can be visible from all over, especially when you leave the airport. And right next to it is pillars for a rail project that was approved in like '08 that isn't finished yet. And on those pillars is designs, like very intricate designs, wasting away, getting beaten up by the elements outside of a decaying stadium on a rail project that is almost 20 years old, that isn't completely ready to roll yet. How can you accept that? Honestly, you don't, but that's just how it is back home. The second part I want to add is Barry Sanders won his Heisman Trophy in Tokyo, Japan. Nobody really talks about that much, but there were Texas Tech at Oklahoma State in the Big 8 were wrapping up the regular season in Tokyo back in, what was that, 1988, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah.
Something like that. We're in 2025, and in that entire time, despite Hawaii being the major collegiate brand in the Pacific, despite having players with Polynesian descent, despite having players from Tonga and Samoa and Fiji and Australia, New Zealand, wherever, despite having players with Japanese and Chinese ethnic last names over the past quarter century, if not before, they have yet to capitalize on the market they currently reside in, and now everybody else is. How is that acceptable from a business standpoint? I don't know. I wish I had the answers, but I'm not qualified to answer them. And this might be a shot, and I apologize if I offend anybody, because I truly don't mean to. But it feels like for my entire lifetime, the people that are in charge of of saying the answers, have the same mindset as me. It's like, I don't know. And it finally felt for the first time in a long time that we had a person in there that was like, okay, I know. And what happened? Fired. That's my closing remarks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I could not have said it better. And I think that's just a great way to end, honestly. Like all this has been built up for years, like, frustrated fans, followers of the program, like you, right? Even me from afar, growing up watching Hawaii games, late at night. A lot of people want Hawaii to survive, but the people that need to have the answers don't have the answers. And now we probably have a Hawaii home game in Los Angeles. But that's my final remarks, Brock. On a more positive note, can you plug, some of the stuff you're working on, the sites that we can find you, and just anything else that you want to share before we end?
Yes, absolutely. Find me on Twitter, Brock.Vierra, at Brock.Vierra. Follow me, I'll follow back. And I always love talking football with everybody. You can follow me on the On SI brands. I'm the beat writer for the Los Angeles Rams on SI. I also write for UCLA on SI, and I'm also a contributor for the Raiders, Chiefs, and Jaguars, if you guys are interested in those teams and interested in my work. Lastly, I do want to end on a positive note because I know I was so negative in that show. So I do want to say, is not trying to get political, but I do appreciate the efforts of the state and the HTA, the Hawaii Tourism Authority, in reaching out to major mainland brands, because if Hawaii is to find a place in this world, they need to become one who is known with the powers of the world. I think this is the right step in trying to improve things in the islands, because things, of course, they're not the best right now. And I love my home. I will forever be a son of Hawaii. And from what I've seen since I left, I haven't been happy about what my home has kind of become, but I do believe I do believe positive things are ahead. And perhaps that this deal with the Rams and the state and the Hawaii Tourism Authority is a big, giant leap into that future.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, I think it's great that they are reaching out to, like you said, people with power. I mean, the NFL is, of course, becoming an even more encompassing presence in our lives, and it's great that that the Rams are willing to do business with them. So hopefully, we do get another preseason game in Hawaii, even if it's at NASED Stadium or the new Aloha Stadium project. But Brock, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, I know that I check out your stuff with the Rams whenever I want to get a look on the other side of the fence, the Niners fan. So it's been a delight to see you, just get that partnership with on SI and everything. And I'll continue to read your work in the future. But again, thanks for taking the time. I always love these conversations. I envision this like taking only like 30 to 40 minutes, but the extra 20 or so minutes was great because it was raw, it was genuine, and I learned a lot. So I thank you a lot for that. But for everyone watching who stuck around until then, thank you again. Thank you for taking your time, whether it's night, morning. Peace, love, and soul. God bless, and the Burger Popper.